Anyways, let's get into some climate change news. This is pretty wild. Yet another, I don't know what you want to call this, just random inland, overland hurricane. I guess, I don't know if they're calling this a derecho or what. But this happened yesterday. Utah experienced a hurricane, kind of. Gusts reaching 99 miles per hour in some areas would equal Category 2 hurricane. So again, we have these just random, kind of out of the blue, very harsh, heavy winds doing damage. Blowing up trees, blowing down trees and whatnot. Anyways, this is from Salt Lake City. Utah was in the southeast or Atlantic portions of the country. Residents would have been hearing terms like hunker down and perfect storm over the last 24 hours due to the storm that walloped the area overnight and Tuesday morning. While the system that hit Utah is unable to be classified as a hurricane, the winds that caused so much damage were almost certainly hurricane strength. Gusts reached up to 99 miles per hour in parts of northern Utah. Hurricanes are measured by sustained winds, but by using gust speed alone, Utah experienced the equivalent of a Category 2 storm. One the National Hurricane Center classifies as a storm that causes extensive damage at landfall. So here are the wind gusts that were measured in Utah. Down the line. Going by sustained winds alone, the region experienced a powerful tropical storm, minus the tropics, of course. Tropical storms can also cause considerable damage. Really? The main difference between what Utah experienced overnight and a real hurricane was a lack of rain and storm surge. The rise in seawater caused by the storm and causes the majority of damages hit by tropical systems. So, very interesting. Very interesting. And, of course, if you can't really see that this is climate change driven, I don't know what you're looking at. So this is, again, this is happening more often. It's becoming a common occurrence that we have these inland cyclones or hurricanes. We had a few bomb cyclones in the last few years. Things that might be categorized as hurricane strength. Over the land, and then we had a derecho a few weeks ago in the Midwest that destroyed a lot of crops, and now we have this thing. Everybody's like, well, okay, we just had a lot of. I don't know if y'all remember a long time ago. I was talking about some guy. I don't remember who this guy is. He was making predictions of the future. He was kind of in the woo-woo on the woo-woo spectrum. One of those, like, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen in the future, soothsayer types. Anyways, he was like, in the future, we're going to have crazy 200 mile an hour winds, kind of like rogue winds. I don't know if he was saying this was due to climate change or just whatever, the future was going to bring to us. Very large changes on the planet, and we're going to have these rogue 250 mile an hour winds, and people were going to have to basically live underground or build structures strong enough to withstand these random, winds out of nowhere. And I often think of this person who I can't remember the name of, and these predictions, right? Corazon de Melon, fires being started by laser beams, or not. Basil Peterson, I picked the wrong week to stop sniffing glue. Anyways, yeah, so like I think about these predictions somewhat more often these days because now we have these just random high wind events or high energy systems happening, land hurricanes, as Poppy David says. Climate tornado hurricane. Fire-nados, all kinds of stuff. Hypercanes, Cougar W says, look up hypercanes. Right, so, and they're also talking about adding another category of hurricane, that hurricane winds are exceeding the highest category right now of wind speed that hurricanes can experience, right? So they're saying, well, we're going to have these super cyclones, super hurricanes come. They're going to have, wind speeds off the charts that we have already experienced. So we're going to have to create these new categories. Are we going to have a category 6 or category 7 hurricanes? And that is very likely under a new climate regime. Kuro Hike says, Costco selling underground windproof dwellings. Get yours today. Indeed. Oh, yeah. You could, I'm sure somewhere on the internet, somebody can come build you an underground bunker, replete with, all the amenities. Kirsten Strand asks, anyone know the logic behind the 630 plus point rally in the Dow? Really? I don't know. Logic, no logic. The Dow goes down, the Dow goes up. People make money, people lose money. It's not tied to anything specific to our economy at the moment, so who knows? Of course, well, so we've been talking about this jet stream anomaly, if you will, or polar vortex event that's happening right now over the United States, right, where we had a high pressure system and we have this, jet stream trough occur and it's pushing out, so it's going to create a lot of turmoil along the edge of that trough, right? So, and there you go. As the weather gets wilder, the weather gets wilder, right? As the planet gets warmer, the planet gets warmer. Gene says if we only had enough plastic, we could build a big plastic fence across the continent, and that would stop the winds, right? It would be like a wind fence. Let's do that. Can we do that? Keith Hayes, air quality here is bad. All right, let's move on into the things that are causing the bad air qualities. More on the California wildfires, just everywhere, seemingly everywhere. There's a fire called the Bear Fire, by the way. Nothing to do with the Black Bear News. We are not affiliated in any way, shape, or form with the Bear Fire. California wildfires, record heat wave fuels fires and forces more evacuations. At least 22 major wildfires are burning across California. Dry air and record-setting high temperatures are exacerbating the flames in many areas. On Tuesday, authorities said over 200 people have been airlifted. We already read about that. Airlifted from the Creek Fire. This is from just a few seconds ago. Despite the huge run on the Bear Fire last night, with civilians trapped, burn injuries, it's interesting to hear how many evacuation refusals are currently occurring on the Willow Fire. That's Frenchtown and Dobbins. They're making they're taking down addresses and names of people who refuse to evacuate. This is 11:30 a.m. in San Francisco today. This hellscape is exactly what I've been dreading since we got 0 inches of rain in February, normally the wettest time of the year, but seeing the fire season get just as bad as I feared and worsening is agonizing, and I don't know what else to say. Right here where I am, we got evacuation possible. We were put on evacuation standby. There's a fire, the Bobcat Fire, burning in the mountains behind our area here. It's kind of a couple cities over from me. So it's not directly in the mountains behind me, but we got alerts to our phone last night from the emergency broadcast system saying you could be evacuated, that the fire was spreading, that the high winds were likely, although there are no winds today, I guess. Again, I don't know what's happening at higher elevations. Donald McCarthy says someone should rake the BBN forest. Indeed, they should. Why aren't Why aren't anybody? Why aren't any of the people raking our forests? Andy, the gardener, the sky is dull red at night. There, apocalyptic, yes. G. Demmer says, stop sending the smoke to Canada, okay? Osama, oh, and we're also out of coffee. Panicked screams. That's exactly what you hear from my house. If I run out of coffee, panicked screams indeed. I'm getting close to the bottom, so, you know, the panic is rising already. But yeah, so, you know, just another day in Southern California or in California. Wildfire season. Poppy Davis, emergency signal here for flash floods. Wow. You're in, that's like San Antonio area, right? Chi Conley says it looks more like a bullfire, bull market versus bear market, and bull market is a market that is on the rise. Indeed. Indeed, environmental coffee house, coffee hoarding. With a name like Environmental Coffee House, you better have lots of coffee. And I think I just was inspired to go buy a whole bunch of coffee. Thank you. Yes, so more about these fires. They are happening all over the West Coast. This is from Yellow Vest News. Wildfire ravages tiny Malden, Washington, destroying post office, city hall, fire station, most homes. Crazy. This is from yesterday. There's actually been a few towns, smaller towns in Oregon and Washington that were, you know, basically destroyed. Hurricane force winds and high temperatures kicked up wildfires across parts of the Pacific Northwest over Labor Day weekend. Are you sure it wasn't laser beams? Are you sure it wasn't directed energy weapons? Burning hundreds of thousands of acres and mostly destroying the small town of Malden in eastern Washington. Flames destroyed about 80% of the homes in Malden. Whitman County Sheriff Brett Myers told CBS Spokane affiliate. Man. Yes, I saw a few reports that other small communities were destroyed or ravaged by fire. This is from Oregon. Live updates. This is from, well, not that live because it's from yesterday. Oregon Governor Kate Brown enacts emergency declaration due to fires. Again, it's from yesterday. She declared emergency yesterday. Tuesday, the declaration authorizes the Oregon Office of State Fire Marshal to mobilize its resources to assist local agencies battling the fires. Brown is enacting the declaration for the Beachy Creek and Lion's Head fires, which were both active overnight in the Santiam Canyon. She has also enacted the declaration for the Holiday Farm fire near McKenzie Bridge. Sounds so happy. Holiday Farm fire. Interstate 5. Exits 14 through 21 near Ashland are closed due to wildfire. The southbound lanes of Highway 99 through the area are also closed. There is a grass fire near Alameda Drive in Quiet Village. Also in southern Oregon, Crater Lake National Park announced Tuesday it is enacting a complete fire ban. Marion County and evacuations for towns along Highway 22. Wow, a series of fast-moving wildfires spurred Level 3 Go Now and Level 2 Get Set evacuations for communities along a 40-mile stretch of highway in the Central Cascades late Monday night and into Tuesday. Wow, okay. Moving on, more fire updates. Wildfires rage across Pacific Northwest. Truckers abandon rigs on I-5 Smoke drifts to New Mexico towns devastated. Out of Fresno, wildfires whipped through isolated communities in 2 states and left backcountry campers. A friend of mine was out, I think, camping. I don't know if it was in the Fresno area, Central California, but I had to leave due to the dense smoke in the area. Wildfires whipped through isolated communities in 2 states and left backcountry campers and hikers stranded, requiring helicopters to airlift more than 200 to safety. Authorities said about 40 wildfires were burning in California alone, though blazes were also reported in Utah, Nevada, Arizona, Idaho, Oregon, Wyoming, and Montana. Let's just call that the entire western piece or part of the United States. Or contiguous. Smoke has been detected at least as far east as New Mexico. The fires devastated some isolated communities. In Oregon, a fast-moving wildfire caused catastrophic damage, probably loss of life in the town of Blue River, east of Eugene. Lane County officials said at least 80 to 100 homes burned. Said County Administrator Steve Makrohiski. I don't know. We'll go with Makrohiski. At an emergency commissioners meeting Tuesday. We expect that other homes and businesses within the fire area have burned. And we should expect loss of life from this fire. About 30 homes were destroyed in the town of Big Creek in California. Resident Toby Waite said the fires came during a Labor Day weekend that trapped many outdoors enthusiasts in the backcountry. Helicopter pilots braved thick smoke to locate stranded people and their pets. Some 164 were choppered out of the Sierra National Forest alone. The fires also led to power outages. California's largest utility cut off power to more than 170,000 customers Tuesday as intense heat, dry conditions, and high winds fueled historic wildfires across the Pacific Northwest. Almost 1,000 fires raged in California since August 15, many sparked by lightning strikes. The state already has set a grim record with more than 2 million acres burned this year, more than 3,000 square miles, with several weeks remaining in the heart of the fire season. Yeah. And it goes on and on. Scott Andrews, thank you for the super chat for the coffee creamer fund. Thank you. I don't put creamer in my coffee. I put honey in my coffee, but honey is quite expensive actually these days. So, especially the kind I like. Osama number 5 for the Sustainable Coffee Fund. Thank you so much, Osama. I appreciate you. Thanks for the super chat. Thanks, guys. Yeah, just out of control fires. I was actually planning a camping trip myself in the next week or two, and I don't even know. Depending on how the fires are looking in the next week, I have no idea whether that's even going to be possible. Not sure. It's looking kind of sketchy. But, you know, cross your fingers. Oh, really, Sandy? Thank you. That'd be great. Yeah, I put honey only in my coffee. And, oh, nice. I'll take it. Nice, thank you. Honey, oh, Kuro, yes, vegan. Vegans don't eat honey. I always wondered about that. But honey is so delicious and medicinal. So good for you. Anyways, I want to read this. I want to get into this because this definitely kind of coincides with some things that I've been talking about, you know, relating to the pandemic and climate change. And this is from The Consciousness of Sheep, titled What the Pandemic Really Taught Us About Climate Change. I kind of skimmed through this and I thought it was interesting. This is from 2 days ago. The NASA image of clear skies over China during their lockdown set the scene for the media to link the COVID-19 pandemic to our lack of response to climate change. Perhaps they told us the most crucial lesson learned as spring gave way to summer was that the economic concerns used to caution against taking radical action had been overstated, which is an understatement. It was perfectly possible, it turned out, for governments to shut down entire sectors of the global economy, such as air transport and shipping, apparently without serious consequences. Most of us, it seems, spend our days employed to do things that are entirely unnecessary. We could just as easily spend our days at home binge watching old TV series, thereby saving on the carbon that we routinely emit during the daily commute and while sitting in an overheated and overlit office all day. Money turned out not to be the problem either. All that sucking of teeth and what's it going to cost thoughing, which was routinely used to debunk responses to proposed action on climate change, how are you going to pay for it, went out the window. Not only could government borrow as much money as it liked at ridiculously low rates of interest, but the central bank could simply spirit new currency into existence and hand it to the treasury. Exactly. So now the veil has lifted. If anybody believes that we have to worry about the debt, come on now. The ghosts of Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan were finally buried too. It turned out that "I'm from the government and I'm here to help" were not, in fact, the most terrifying words in the English language. Indeed, it was when government sat back and left COVID-19 to market forces that things went downhill. While countries like New Zealand heroically banished SARS-CoV-2, Britain and the USA complacently allowed the virus to spread exponentially. On purpose or not, what say you guys? Killing far more people than might otherwise have been the case. Leaving tracking climate change to market forces is having the same effect. It goes without saying that countries which failed to follow the science fared much worse than those that took it seriously from the start. And yet, when it comes to climate change, despite the science being settled, governments, even those which cover themselves in greenwash, refuse to act. Well put. In short, those demanding that we apply the lessons from the pandemic to tackling climate change have learned exactly the lessons that they wanted to learn from the beginning. The question is, can we trust their conclusions? The first point to make is that despite the NASA images, the various lockdowns will have little impact. As an editorial in New Scientist explains, global lockdowns to halt the spread of the coronavirus will have a negligible impact on rising temperatures due to climate change, researchers have found. Yeah, but I find that to be a bit dodgy because you're talking about a short-term impact on emissions, right? You know, you're talking about a dip that went down and then it kind of slowly went back up. You know, that's, of course, that is going to have negligible impacts. But if you did that for a year or 2 years or 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, golly gee, I think it would have an impact. You know, why not measure it in a long? This doesn't make any sense. And maybe that's what they're trying to say. Lockdowns to stop the spread of coronavirus caused huge falls in transport use, as well as reductions in industry and commercial operations. And golly, if we just kept doing that, we'd actually make an impact, cutting the greenhouse gases and pollutants caused by vehicles and other activities. The impact is only short-lived, however, and analysis shows that even if some lockdown measures last until the end of 2021, global temperatures will only be 0.01 C lower than expected by 2030. Well, yeah, of course they will. This shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. The atmosphere is massive. It has taken the energy from 3 centuries of industry to warm it by less than a degree. Believing that allowing the non-essential middle class to work from home for a couple months would change anything was fanciful from the start. Indeed, we already knew that it takes a major economic collapse, such as the fall of the Soviet Union or the Great Depression, just to slow the increase in global warming. Well, yeah, but that's what we had this year, and that is a great thing. Economic collapse, come on. You know, I'm rooting for team economic collapse. Or, you know, even, actually, I'm not rooting for collapse. I'm rooting for sustained degrowth or managed degrowth or compassionate degrowth. We all understand that, right? Anyways, they hit you with this graph here showing downturns in CO2 emissions in the past, right? Great Depression here, end of World War II, of course. We stopped burning up all that oil. Look at the rise though in emissions here from 1950 on. Holy shnikes. First oil shock, that's 1972 or one, whatever it was. Second oil shock, 77-ish, a little bigger. Collapse of the USSR, barely a blip. 2008 banking crash, a nicer blip, but still, look at this. Look at the rise, though. It goes steeper and steeper and steeper and steeper. We're not slowing jack shit. All the climate change, Green New Deal optimists who are like, well, who want to say like, we're slowing it down. We're bringing it down a little bit over the last 10 years. There's been, they keep throwing out these false statements like, we've shut down a lot of coal plants yet, but you doubled the coal plant building in other countries. So no, that's not true. Just because you closed the coal plants in one country doesn't mean that they all went away. So totally ridiculous. Anyways, that graph right there sums up a lot. It gets steeper and steeper and steeper. It is entirely probable, of course, that the lockdowns will cause a massive economic crash beginning in the autumn when governments withdraw the various stimulus packages, I think they're meant to say. That being the case, then the pandemic may well result in a big drop in carbon emissions. This, though, is not the lesson climate activists want to draw. Why? Because they want everything to be nice and tidy and non-threatening to the masses, because that's the only way to get people to change. Okay. Let's treat everybody like children. Let's treat everybody like very fragile, timid woodland creatures. I don't know. We don't treat timid little woodland creatures with as much of the soft gloves that we treat other human beings with. Because if the only way of lowering our carbon emissions is to inflict economic misery upon billions of people worldwide, then the economic objections to climate change will have been proved correct. Well, yeah, but you got to listen. You got to break down the truth to people. The truth is, we can't live the way we live. The truth is, our standard of living cannot continue. We must accept some kind of, at least lessened standard of living. If not, we have to accept and embrace the poverty, or at least some level of poverty that will allow us to live with much, much less. Have you invested in poverty today? Get in on the ground floor where the getting's good. Cost is nothing. The lockdown themselves, partial and largely benefiting the metropolitan liberal class, were not widely accepted either. From the beginning, libertarian and conservative-leaning people took exception to the draconian powers taken by the government, not all of them used, by the way, to enforce the lockdowns. By the end of May, groups from both the far left and far right were routinely breaching the lockdown provisions in order to take to the streets and protest. And although the majority of people accepted the measures largely because they did not want to unknowingly infect vulnerable family, friends, or neighbors, the protests suggest a limit beyond which people will begin to break the law. There you go. Given that the measures required to reverse climate change would be far more draconian, far more, and would have to continue year after year for decades, the more appropriate lesson to draw is that people are not going to accept them, not least because the COVID-19 science has proved widely inaccurate. Going into the pandemic, doctors and public health scientists were among the few groups of officials not to have disgraced themselves in the eyes of the public. In the aftermath, they will be lucky not to find themselves lumped in with the bankers, journalists, and politicians. I think it's already too late for that. This is largely due to their habit of projecting certainty outward while entertaining doubt behind closed doors. Believe science, believe officialdom, believe the fact checkers, believe news organizations, believe us, believe us, believe us. On the pandemic, at least, believe the intelligence communities. Believe us. On the pandemic, at least, the science was far from settled. Indeed, most of the pandemic plans which had been developed were based around an outbreak of influenza. As a result, we were treated to a medical version of Maslow's hammer. Since the only tool available was a response to flu, COVID-19 was treated as if it was an exotic strain of influenza. This undoubtedly killed people because those features of COVID-19, such as microclotting damaging multiple organs, which didn't fit with the symptoms of flu, were ignored, while symptoms which only apparently fitted, such as breathlessness caused by the lack of oxygen in the blood, were inappropriately treated by ramming steel ventilator tubes deep into patients' lungs. Right. You know, there's like a 50% chance of survival once you get on a ventilator. So there was that, right? You know, people are like, we need ventilators, put people on ventilators. But we know that once you get on a ventilator, your chances of surviving are go way down. But maybe that the chance of surviving is higher than if you're not on a ventilator. I'm not really totally sure about that, but let's move on. Even the incongruous loss of taste and smell, which is now accepted as a central symptom of COVID-19, was dismissed by clinicians to begin with. The epidemiologists fared a little better. After catastrophizing that millions of people were going to die within weeks as the virus spread exponentially, they were forced to admit that their modeling was wrong. Far fewer people were falling ill, still less dying. Nevertheless, one of the key responses to this early modeling, returning infected patients to care homes, see New York, Andrew Cuomo, patients to care homes in order to prevent hospitals from being overwhelmed, unnecessarily doubled the number of deaths. The later objection that many of those people would have died anyway later in the year does nothing to change the fact that these unfortunate souls died in the worst way possible, gasping for air, lacking any human contact, and separated from loved ones. So that happened in New York State under a Democratic governor. You know, is he a eugenicist? Did he just let people die? Did he sacrifice people to the virus? Some people think he did. Having witnessed epidemiologists apparently exaggerating a threat in order to drive a draconian response, there is a real risk that climate scientists will be cast in the same light. How do we know, for example, that the models suggesting anywhere from 5 to 8 degrees of warming are any different to disease models suggesting millions of deaths? Might it be that 2 to 3 degrees of warming within the bounds of IPCC modeling might be the upper limit of climate change? Right, indeed. In any case, it is far from clear. Well, 2 to 3 degrees of warming, even if that's the upper limit of climate change, and no, I'm sorry, it's not going to stop there. So that's a bit of a misleading sentence in itself, but let's go with that anyways. But let's also go with the fact that 2 to 3 degrees of warming might in itself spell extinction, right? We might only have to get to 2 or 3 degrees and then it's extinction. The idea that we're going to survive 5 to 8 degrees of warming is fairly ridiculous. In any case, it is far from clear that climate science is offering solutions any more relevant than doctors initially treating COVID-19 as if it was a flu, deploying non-renewable energy harvesting technologies has failed. They account for less than 5% of the world's primary energy consumption, despite decades of government and public support. Nuclear is far too expensive to take the place of coal and gas and electricity generation, and while its proponents point to just over the horizon technologies, again, not implemented yet, these might take decades to deploy at scale, even if they can be shown to be viable. And there's an outside chance that we might kill ourselves doing such a thing anyways. Only cuts in energy use, cuts far deeper than would occur in the deepest of economic depressions, will save the day. Ding, ding, ding. I'm going to read that again because this is the absolute truth. Only cuts in energy use, cuts far deeper than would occur in the deepest of economic depressions will save the day, and nobody is voting for those. And so, geoengineering and going nuclear is most likely the course that governments and the gazillionaires who would pull their strings will pursue in the longer term, since these are the only options that allow business as usual to continue. Wow. Wowzers. Indeed, this is not the only reason why claiming the pandemic demonstrates the central role of government might be mistaken. Different governments responded differently for both economic and cultural reasons, and while those who cheer the red and blue political teams have been quick to point to the apparent failings of countries run by what approximates to the opposite team, we must wait until the end to draw conclusions. In the end, whenever that turns out to be, lockdowns and aggressive trace and isolate systems may only slow the rate of infection rather than prevent people from being infected. If this is so, then the economic impact of shutting down economies and causing millions of job losses may yet to prove worse than the virus itself. The point is that after 4 decades of neoliberal insistence that governments should leave almost everything to the supposedly free market, we have governments comprised of Peter Principle, 3D printed politicians, each as ineffective and incompetent as their predecessor. It is vacuous to claim that the blue team would have done anything different than the red team, because both in the end will follow the advice of their experts. Oh, that is bang on. In politics, it is always better to follow the advice and be wrong, even if this results in the deaths of thousands of citizens, than to risk going against the advice, even if you believe you are right. The idea that these politicians who have become specialists in nothing else but conning people into voting for them are the best people to lead our response against climate change is an article of faith which detracts from the evidence so far. Long before governments will be fit to lead the response to climate change, we will need to create a radically different system of government to the current neoliberal version. Yes, this version is not going to work. But that opens up an even deeper level of conflict and distrust, because I don't want to live in your version of an ideal governing system any more than you want to live in mine. What then might be the real lesson from COVID-19? I would argue that COVID-19 has changed nothing. As Basil Little Hart once put it, if we learn anything from history, is that we learn nothing from history. Governments will continue to pay lip service to climate change, but the economy will always come first. Activists will continue to protest, but will continue to fail to offer a viable alternative policy program. The majority of people will continue to go about their daily lives, comforted by the erroneous belief that clever people somewhere else are dealing with it. As 8 billion of us grow to become 10 billion, we will continue burning fossil fuels, cutting down forests, and despoiling what remains of Earth's resources, because this is the only way so large a population can hope to feed itself. Meanwhile, states and entrepreneurs will reach for any high-tech alternative to reversing course in the vain hope of maintaining infinite growth on a finite planet, because when all is said and done, what the end of the lockdown demonstrated was that all of us, young and old, left and right, blue and red, can only tolerate a change in our lifestyles for a short time. There is simply no way that more than an inconsequential minority will ever put up with the level of disruption needed even to slow climate change, still less reverse it. Well, what y'all think of that? I thought that was a pretty damn decent article. G. Demer says yes, the brown pill. I rather enjoyed that article. They, obviously fairly pessimistic that anybody's going to do anything consequential about climate change. But some very salient truths in there. I enjoyed it. Hope you all did too. Hey guys, remember to like, share, and subscribe, and you can support the channel. The links below, PayPal, Patreon, Square. Also, if you'd like to watch the live streams, you can watch the live streams on my Patreon channel. You can subscribe for as little as $1. So hopefully I will see you over there, and thanks so much.